and welcome to this brief PowerPoint presentation on components of an argument. This presentation is prepared for my English 201 Advanced Composition class. This is Dr. James Patterson. Let us begin with clarification of my research into argument. I used to teach argumentation and debate, and I used as a textbook Critical Thinking and Communication by Edward Inch and Barbara Warnick. So I will be drawing materials from their textbook as we work through this course in advanced composition. They, Edward Inch and Barbara Warnick, they define an argument as a set of statements in which a claim is made, support is offered for it, and there is an attempt to influence someone in a context of disagreement. There are four elements then that come out of that definition. According to Edward Inch and Barbara Warnick in their book Critical Thinking and Communication, there are four basic elements to an argument. There must be a debatable claim. Sometimes that's called a thesis or a statement of proposition. There must be evidence provided in support of the claim. There must be reasoning which links the evidence to the claim. And there must be a clear attempt to persuade. Many of my students in the past have been taught in junior high or high school that a persuasive essay is one in which you provide both sides of the issue and then you try to work out there. And so I've read dozens of essays that were intended to be persuasive but ended with, these are the choices, you choose. And that's not persuasion. There must be a clear attempt to persuade. Now, let's first start with that first piece, a debatable claim. A claim is an expressed opinion or a conclusion that the arguer wants accepted. In other words, I have an opinion that there is life extraterrestrial. And I want that accepted, and so I am attempting to make an argument, a debatable claim, that there exists extraterrestrial life in the universe. Let us say then the next piece is evidence. That's what I want to do. If I want to say that there is extraterrestrial life in the universe, I want to then provide some evidence in support of that opinion. Evidence consists of a couple of different things, and we'll look at these in the class. First, evidence consists of facts or conditions that are objectively observable. That means if I can see an alien from another planet, and you can see an alien, the same alien from another planet, then that is what we would call objectively observable. If I'm the only one that sees the aliens, that's not evidence. Now, there are beliefs and statements that are generally accepted as true by the recipients of the argument. Let me say that again. Evidence can consist of beliefs or statements generally accepted as true by the recipients of the argument. That means if I'm in a religious worship service, I can talk about the existence of God without having to prove the existence of God, because the existence of God is a belief that is generally accepted as true by the audience. If I'm in a psychology or a biology or a chemistry class at a public university and I talk about the existence of God, now I do not have a belief that is generally accepted as true by the audience. So that's the key. It's the beliefs or statements that are generally accepted as true by the audience of the argument. And then we can also use as evidence conclusions which have been previously established. Conclusions which have been previously established. Years ago in one of my argumentation and debate classes, we spent the entire semester dealing with the question of trying juveniles as adults. We spent the entire semester. We did research, we did logic, we did argument, trying juveniles as an adult. And what we came to early in the semester is that we had to have a certain demarcation of juveniles. In other words, we said as a class, any juvenile who is not yet 11 years old cannot be tried as an adult. Does that make sense? We felt 11 years is a threshold point, the beginning of possibly the beginning of puberty. And so anyone who is below that should not ever be tried as an adult. So that was a conclusion that was previously established. And then as we move forward into other arguments, it was already established by the class that anyone who had not yet reached their 11th birthday would never be tried as an adult. So it became a statement generally accepted as true by the recipients of the audience because it was a conclusion that had been previously established. And so those are three types of evidence that we can use in our argumentation in this class. Reasoning is the construction of a rational link between the evidence and the claim, and that authorizes the step we make when we draw the conclusion. That's a long sentence. Let me say it again. Reasoning is the construction of a rational link between the evidence and the claim, which authorizes the step we make when we draw a conclusion. In many years of teaching speech, I would allow my students to pick their own topics for their persuasive speeches. And so over the years, I've listened to probably 100 or more speeches about abortion. I had a number of students who would bring a visual aid to class. It's a picture that's been circulated on the internet for years. It's the picture of an adult hand, palm up. It's wearing a surgical latex glove. And in the palm of the hand, there are small pieces of the unborn fetus. In other words, one particular technique for abortion requires the doctor to go into the womb and cut the pieces of the unborn fetus out piece by piece. But if they miss a piece and they leave a piece inside the body of the woman, it becomes dead, and then that could set into and kill her as well, the mother as well. So there is a nurse who is assigned to collect all the pieces and put them together in his or her hand to make sure they got all the pieces. All right? So here's this picture. It's out there in the internet. You can find it if you want to. It's an adult hand wearing a surgical latex glove, and there are pieces that form a small body. And I had students time and time again show this picture in their speeches and say, see, abortion is wrong. Abortion should be illegal. And I always had to mark down the student because the picture is evidence. The picture is an objectively observable fact. That's a picture, that's a hand, that's a small pieces of an unborn child. And the claim was that abortion is wrong or abortion should be illegal. What the student were missing time and time again is this element of reasoning. Reasoning is the construction of a rational link between the evidence and the claim, and which authorizes the step we make when we draw a conclusion. I would say to my students, if the visual image of all those little baby parts in the palm of a nurse's hand was in and of itself persuasive, then nurses would work one day. They would see that baby broken up and cut into pieces in his or her hand, and the nurse would quit. If the body pieces in the palm of the hand were in and of itself persuasive. But it's not, because the nurse does that every day, does it multiple times every day, and still comes back tomorrow, still has a normal life, etc. Are you with me? So the reasoning is what links the picture to the claim. The reasoning is what tells us why what we're seeing as a fact, as an observable fact, what is the rational link between why that makes abortion wrong or illegal? So this is a key point. Reasoning is the link. And in this class, we'll look at a couple of different types of reasoning. We will look specifically at inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning. All right, and then number 4, there is the attempt to influence. Arguments are attempt to influence someone within a context where people disagree with each other. So if everybody agrees to go see the new Star Wars movie, there's no argument. If everybody in the room agrees that smoking is bad for your health, then there's no argument. Does that make sense? Arguments are attempts to influence someone in a context where people disagree with each other. One of the last times I taught the argumentation and debate class, I had opened it up for their final presentation on any argument that they wanted to pick. And I had a young woman who said she wanted to argue that the DUI, driving under the influence laws and penalties in California, needed to be stricter. And I thought, oh, well, okay, that's an interesting claim. It is a statement of opinion which she wants the audience to accept. But when I asked the question of the class, I said, is there anyone here who disagrees? Is there anyone here who feels that our DUI laws and penalties are strict enough or too strict in California? And no one raised their hand. Everyone in the class accepted the premise that the laws and penalties should be more severe. And so I told her she had no argument. She'd have to pick another topic. But she came back the next class period and she was adamant. This was something she felt truly passionate about. There were personal experiences in her life. She wanted to talk about why and how the California DUI laws and penalties needed to be stricter. And so I told her, take your position and push it to the extreme so that someone in the audience is going to disagree. In other words, you want stricter, but be very specific and make it so strict that some of your audience are going to say, whoa, 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 that's too strict. And so when she got up on the final day period to give her final presentation, she argued thus. She said, I want to convince you that after the third conviction for driving under the influence in the state of California, there should be mandatory death sentence. Well, she already knew that there were people in the class that were opposed to the death penalty. So when she attached the death penalty to driving under the influence, she automatically had a debatable opinion. And it fueled her argument, it fueled her presentation, and it really engaged the students in the question and answer period that followed her presentation. So remember, there must be an attempt to influence. All right? And we say attempts because the arguer may or may not succeed in making the presentation. All right. This is an argument model that sort of visually describes what we've just been talking about. There needs to be a debatable claim. There needs to be evidence in support of the claim. And there needs to be reasoning that links the evidence to the claim. And surrounding all of this is the context of an attempt to influence. But I want to talk about this evidence one more time, because evidence has to be agreed upon. Remember, we said earlier that evidence is a belief or statement that is generally accepted by the audience. In other words, evidence needs to be something that we agree on. If I bring into a presentation or an argument a piece of evidence, say the existence of God, that not everyone in the audience agrees with, then I don't have evidence. I have another arguable claim. So what Edward Inch and Barbara Warnick talked about in their textbook is that for any issue we can think of, there is a level of agreement on the facts. And this level, or imaginary line that separates what is accepted by the audience from what is not accepted, is called the level of dispute. So here's our argument again. We have a debatable claim. We have evidence in support of the claim. We have reasoning, which links the evidence to the claim. And then I want you to see this level of dispute. What it's saying is the claim is debatable. So it is above the level of dispute. But the evidence has to be below the level of dispute. The evidence needs to be accepted already. Okay? So, in order for evidence to provide support to an argument, the evidence must fall below the level of dispute. Otherwise, you've got another argument that you have to deal with first. All right? That are the components of the argument, and we'll be dealing with these terms as we move forward in the class. Thank you.